Hey there, welcome to One Take, powered by backers. Right?
No judging.
Yeah.
No judging.
The millennials are really changing that.
Is charm. No.
All success begins with desire.
I feel like I'm on fire right now.
OMG, baby,
Hey there, welcome to One Take, powered by backers. Justin Fox here, Wanda, Deschamps. Wanda, thank you very much for joining me today. How are you today?
I'm good, and thanks for the opportunity to join you.
Awesome. So I'll do a quick little intro here. Where is it? So you're the founder and principal of Liberty Co., which seeks to increase the participation level of the neurodiverse population in the workforce with a special emphasis on autism due to your own diagnosis at midlife. So that's interesting. I guess I usually go for like a choose your own adventure, but why don't we start right there? Diagnosed midlife autism. Obviously somewhere on the spectrum, right? What was that like? Tell me a little bit about, or tell everyone a little bit about that.
Well, what I say is that it was a relief.
Okay. Because you kind of maybe knew something was there, you just weren't sure. So it's kind of like could put a finger to what was, point a finger at what was actually there potentially. Okay, interesting.
So it's a twofold answer. I didn't know what was going on my whole life.
Okay.
And obviously more at different times than others.
Right.
And then there was a catalyst due to a mental breakdown at work in May 2017. And so there was the build up to that, which was really challenging for me,
right,
and for people around me, for my colleagues and my family, of course, for my husband and our children, and for my friends. And it was a really troubling time. And so it was a relief that day in July 2017 when I got my diagnosis. And then I was able to look back and look through a new prism
and see
why, so many things didn't add up. Why at times I felt, Wanda, things are more challenging for you than really they should be, given
right,
your privilege, given from the outside looking in, you have everything.
right.
So why is there always this piece gnawing at you? There's obviously, Justin, so much more I could say. I've written and I speak about this, and even then, I'm never telling the whole story. There's a really big story there with all kinds of parts, but I hope that's helpful for you in a bit of a snapshot.
And so, just to give context to everyone that's watching, you went, have a university degree from SFX, master's from University of Regina. So you're like, and I was just looking at the dates here. I kind of went back, like you completed your master's in 2015. So like, we're talking like after you've completed a master's degree, and you've accomplished a lot, sort of obviously education and, career wise and different things and like you said, kind of in privilege and different things. So I guess my question, and this is, wasn't thinking of this, but what spurred you? Like, how do you go? Like, obviously you said there's something gnawing at you. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of different things. What spurs you to kind of go take that test versus other things, or like what kind of guided you? This might be interesting for a lot of people who are dealing with things. I joke, and it's not a joke, but I self-diagnosed myself with ADHD, at the end, in university. I took phys ed. I was doing psych courses and sports psych and all these different psych courses, and kind of came across the concept of ADHD, which even at that time, 20 years ago, was still relatively new, right? Like it's a lot more popular now, but 97, 98, 99 and around, it was still relatively new, and not a lot of people knew about it, right? So what kind of inspired you to get tested or to even go down that path, I guess?
It's a great question. And there's a few points that I'll share that I hope will help answer. So number one, our older son had been diagnosed with autism when we were in China.
Okay.
So I started moving around at age 40.
Right.
And Adrian was diagnosed at the age of 9 in Regina. And so that was in 2012.
Right.
And then our younger son went through a psychological assessment the winter of 2017 because of calls we had received from the school, and questions arose about him when we were in Regina, but nothing that led to a psychological assessment. And then we decided that was really necessary. And so a few things happened in a really short time. I had a breakdown at work, May 12th, 2017. And so I mentioned, that winter and that spring, things are really, really building.
Right.
And mental health is breaking down. In fact, it was becoming debilitating, and I should not have been at work. I should have been on mental health leave. But I had to break down. I was at work. And then Renee was diagnosed on May 24th, 2017. We received his diagnosis of autism. Right. And I had a previously scheduled doctor's appointment the next day.
You did? Oh, so it kind of worked out. Okay. So you were able to almost start the process like right away and say, hey, what do you think, kind of thing?
My words to her were, I think I have it too.
Right. Okay.
And so I asked her my own psychological assessment, and then things moved quite quickly because I was already in therapy because my mental health was deteriorating.
Right.
I've been in therapy other times in my life, but I was back in therapy. And at the practice where Renee was receiving a psychological assessment, not with the same therapist.
Right.
But then I asked for a psychological assessment from Dr. Heimpel, who had given Renee's to us. And so things were able to move rather quickly for all those reasons I just said. I was already in therapy. I was known to the practice. We had the background with Renee and Adrian and so on. So July 25th, actually Renee's 10th birthday, I received my diagnosis, and I said, it's a relief. So I hope that answers the question. It's such a good one, Justin. Why did you zero in on autism, Wanda? I think I have it too. Why not
anything else?
Compulsive disorder or bipolar or borderline personality disorder or
any of them, all of the above. Yeah. Well, I guess it's because you obviously you saw with your two children, they had been tested. So there's obviously maybe a genetic thing there. So you were able to kind of just reach out, you were in that, and then you were able to, which is interesting because I think if that didn't happen, if let's say whatever, obviously you have kids and let's say, God forbid, you didn't have kids and for whatever reason, and you're in midlife and you would never really know. So you'd be going down various rabbit holes almost potentially, right? Trying to find, or if your kids didn't have it, let's say, and you still had it. Obviously both scenarios can exist. You might be caught kind of. So, there's obviously probably a lot of people out there that are maybe in that circumstance where there is a lot of uncertainty. You just named off 3 or 4 other, upset OCD or other, disorders, right? That maybe people, borderline personality disorder that people might have, that would be impacting their life. And if maybe at a smaller amount, so it's not like this massive disruption, but it's, like you said, gnawing away at them a little bit by a little bit, right? It's making it harder and harder in everyday life than it needs to be potentially.
It's a huge spectrum. Some people say it's not a spectrum, it's a continuum. These are all
what's the difference between a spectrum and a continuum? Isn't that literally what it is? But anyways, okay, we won't get into semantics.
Well, the things that researchers spend all their time on when they're focused in this area. And I shouldn't say all their time. In that you could spend all your time just in one part. And just to give you a sense as to how big an area this is and how it's all interconnected, I'm going to throw something else at you. And that is, I'm giving you a sense of May 2017, and I'm giving you a sense of July 2017. Well, this is going to really, really show you how small the world is, because June 2017, what happened? Dr. Stephen Shearer received an honorary degree from the University of Waterloo from the Faculty of Science. And where was I working?
Waterloo.
University of Waterloo. And I saw a poster that Dr. Stephen Shearer, who is an expert in autism research, is giving a talk the day before he receives his honorary degree. I thought, Wanda, you have to go hear him.
Right.
So I went to hear him, and one of the first things he said, that is based on his research, what points him in terms of genetic causes for autism, paternal age, and the sweet spot is 32. And my husband was 33 when Adrian was born.
Right.
And my father was 51 when I was born. And I sat there with my jaw on the floor. And when he finished his presentation, I said, Dr. Scheer, could you repeat your opening line around your research? And
right. So obviously the age, the older age, right?
It's the older age, according to him. I mean, there's so many researchers out there. So anyway, he went on to what I can only describe was to talk about my family. That's how it felt. He talked about all the interconnectivity around neurological, and I don't call them conditions. Sorry, I don't call them disorders. I call them conditions.
Okay.
Because disorder has a pejorative connotation, and condition is more positive.
Right. Yeah. It's sort of a negative connotation.
He talked about schizophrenia, and he talked about bipolar, and he talked about these conditions that are in my family.
Yeah.
So I went up to him at the end and I said, Dr. Scheer, you described my family. And he said, you're not the first person who's come up and said that to me at the end of the presentation. He said, that actually happens to me quite a bit. He asked, would you like to participate in my research? And I said, absolutely. So he gave me his card and I connected with his office. And so my husband and I and our kids are participants in a longitudinal study that he's conducting. He is the director of the Center for Genomics at Sick Kids. And actually, as of yesterday, he was appointed chief of research.
Well,
so yeah, this is great news. This is great news because the research is so important. And just to touch on something that you mentioned that is also really important, and that is underdiagnosis and misdiagnosis.
Right.
And it's particularly happening in women. So boys and men are diagnosed with autism at about 4 to 5 times women and girls.
And it's not that disproportionate who actually has it. It's just being diagnosed, is what you're saying.
Being diagnosed. So do we know that it's 1-to-1? No.
Right.
No, I'm not saying that. And I'm not even a researcher who can put out that hypothesis.
Right.
I'm saying it's 1-to-1. But 4 to 5 is a huge gap.
Right.
And so just look at me. You know, if Wanda's diagnosed a month before her 47th birthday, and other women, you know, who I've read about or I've connected with, they're not diagnosed until their 30s, 40s, 50s.
Right.
And who else are we missing? And we have reason to believe we're missing a lot of girls and women. And it's something that I'm trying to change by sharing my story.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, obviously, so you're working at Waterloo, as director of, I'm sort of looking at your LinkedIn here, Advancement Faculty of Applied Health Sciences. So you're obviously a leader in the university community. Then you got into the consulting. Now you're with Liberty Co. So before we get into that, though, I have a question. So that, pardon my ignorance, I know obviously I wouldn't say very familiar. I'm familiar with autism. I've heard of autism. I've had come across people who have had autism at various levels on the continuum or spectrum, as you said. For people watching, like, describe what is autism. And I know there's like some other forms of it. Name escapes me. What's the
we use the term Asperger's.
Asperger's. Yes, exactly.
Yes. We don't. Yeah. So as of 2013, we don't use Asperger's anymore.
Okay. So I'm outdated by about 7 years. My apologies. 8 years.
No, Justin, it still pops up.
Okay.
It still pops up. You know, 2013, in terms of research, 2013 is yesterday. I mean, a generation is a short period of time, you know, 2 generations. So, no, you still see it pop up. So autism fits within neurodiversity, and neurodiversity is a concept coined by Australian sociologist Judy Singer to describe differences in human brain makeup. And autism's one.
Right.
And there's also ADHD, which you mentioned. And those tend to be ones that are fairly well known. And then ones that are not as well known are dyscalculia and dyspraxia.
Okay.
And so it is a really, really long spectrum. And, we don't have time today. I mean, we could even...
we could, do you want us? No, I'm just, we could do a series on this, right?
And if we did, we still wouldn't even...
Right. Of course.
Tip of the iceberg.
Right.
But I can say just very generally, the differences are marked in variances that come across in communication. And perhaps you've picked up on some, and perhaps our listeners, that I do communicate differently, and that we interact differently.
Okay.
And some of that's, connected to communication, but I interact differently. The differences that I have from the mainstream population do present themselves when I'm interacting with people. And
I mean, I'll be honest. I wouldn't say it's noticeable. We've had a few conversations on the phone. I wouldn't notice unless you mentioned it in this conversation. I would say, hey, yeah, we're having a good conversation. So not to cut you off, but I mean, so you feel like there's a slight difference? Is that the idea, or is it perceived by others or perceived by you, or how does autism play out? Is it more internally perceived or externally perceived?
Justin, you're asking all the questions that researchers spend their time on. You should have a researcher because these are the questions, right? So, I could spend all day talking about. So I mask my differences.
Okay.
And this is something that we've learned particularly about women. So I do not interact based on intuition in the same way that you do or other members of the neurotypical population. So I've learned to interact. I've had to do it.
Right.
Because it doesn't come to me in the same way that, say, it comes to you or other members of the neurotypical population, even though you claim to be a member of the neurodiverse population with self-diagnosed ADHD. I understand.
Hey, you know what? If you ask my wife, I probably have all of them, but anyways, that's another another conversation for another time. But
the other thing, Justin, I think that is really important is that I've changed.
Okay.
So again,
recently, so now you think you've changed the masking, or you're unmasking, or what do you? Describe what do you mean by change?
I'm still masking. I wouldn't be able to navigate the world, if I didn't mask to a degree. So I'm still masking. Although, sometimes I'm very relaxed, and and obviously the people that I'm closest to, I'm the most relaxed.
Right.
There's new people I meet, and I'm very relaxed.
Right.
Especially those that ask great questions, not to name any people in particular.
There we go.
But I've also changed the way I behave. And I mean, that is something that also, in terms of my diagnosis, when I say, it was relief, is because I noticed my whole life I had to change.
Right.
I constantly changed. I was in elementary and I always had to change. I was in junior high school, university.
Right.
Definitely in the workplace. I just constantly changed. And I pulled in all kinds of resources, executive coaches, books, webinars,
trying to figure out.
Trying to figure out this world.
Right.
And what happened, and this is something that happens with women with autism in particular, because of societal expectations around gender.
Right.
And assumptions that are made. I couldn't do it anymore. Imagine how exhausting.
Yeah, you're constantly on stage, kind of, right? Basically,
yes, that's why they call it masking. It's being on stage and being a different person, being like an actor, to try to make your way into the world. And it presents in a mental health crisis in a lot of occasions, I should say, even suicidality.
Right. Because you're kind of pushed to the brink almost, right? You're not, you kind of can't go on. You're exhausted. You're kind of, and you're not sure really where to turn. It's interesting. Okay. So obviously I think this kind of leads into Liberty Co. We talked, I was going to talk a little bit about your women in entrepreneurship, the hub, the knowledge hub, but I noticed here that you're no longer part of that. So do you want to touch on that a little bit and then touch about a Liberty Co, or like, what are your...
Oh, it's part of it. So that was a 7-month contract.
Okay.
I was really grateful
to
do that work. And so, so our listeners know, yes, I am focused on neurodiverse employment.
Right.
And, special place in my heart for autism.
Right.
So I have an emphasis there. However, I am about disability employment generally. I never say one aspect's more important than the other. It's just that I have a special passion for neurodiversity and a special interest in autism. But the Women Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub knew about me and my work, and I knew about them because I was attending their sessions and I was learning more and more about what they do. And so I had the really good fortune of conducting a mapping exercise for them about programs and supports that are available for women with disabilities who are entrepreneurs or considering it.
Right.
So I did the mapping exercise.
This is a Canadian organization?
In
Canada.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Nationwide, not limited to Ontario, nationwide.
Right.
And submitted a report to them. And we had a few focus groups, and that fed into the report. And so they're working on a larger report now. And that will be coming out. And so I know it shows as ending on my LinkedIn.
But it's I didn't realize the transition. But so obviously Liberty Co. So you don't have to disclose the whole report, but like what are some, and I don't even know what the report fully is, but what would the report be about? Is it more about like guidance on how organizations, small organizations, entrepreneurs that are looking to hire, or is it more on the government organizational programs that they can put in place to be able to hire? You mentioned women, obviously, on sort of the neurodiverse spectrum or disabilities in general. I know we were almost going to jump on this call a week ago, and it was the disability week, right?
Accessibility day.
Right.
I believe. No, that's right. No, it was actually
you're at an event, right?
Accessibility Week.
Accessibility Week, exactly.
Yeah.
Right?
So I was attending a lot of things.
Right. And that was sort of my old world that I was I was involved,
which is really neat.
with the mobility shop. But yeah. So what was the report? Tell us, give us your Cole's notes of the report, maybe.
Okay. So yes, to women with disabilities broadly.
Right.
I certainly paid attention to neurodiversity and I paid attention to autism. However, it was about women with disabilities broadly.
Right.
It was about where are the gaps? Okay. What can we do to help support women with disabilities who are entrepreneurs? And what programs and supports do we either need to augment or bring in or communicate better for women with disabilities who are considering it?
Right.
And then I did touch on the workplace, because this is something that I always highlight. Entrepreneurship is not a substitute for inclusive workplaces.
Okay.
So people with disabilities are entrepreneurs, just like, any group in our society. Of course, there's a number who are entrepreneurs, and it is a pathway, and that's great. However, it's not instead of creating more inclusive and accessible workplaces. We need both.
Right.
And so that's why I'm always advocating for IDEA, inclusion, diversity, equity, accessibility, because we need our workplaces subscribing to IDEA for every race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation. And we need them for people with disabilities as well. And that's worldwide.
Right.
But entrepreneurship still needs more work. It is a path. And if it's going to be truly accessible for women with disabilities, it does need more work. And, there's so many things I could say about.
I was going to say, what's the list of, what did you prescribe we don't have time for that.
You don't have time. And I think you can detect my passion. It's something that, if you did have the time, I would, but look for that report. It will be coming out. I promise I will share it on my social.
Okay.
There's work to be done in a few buckets. We need programs and supports that are more accessible. We need some new ones, but we need to better highlight ones that we have.
Right.
We do need to understand more in terms of what's going on out there. My mentor, Wendy Sukier, who's the founder and the director of the Diversity Institute, talks about disaggregated data. So, just like we've looked at autism through the perspective of a white man, we've looked at, say, disability research through the perspective of a white man. So, frankly, we don't even know enough about women with disabilities and entrepreneurship. And then within that, if we don't know enough about women, we don't know enough about Black women with disabilities. We don't know enough about Indigenous women with disabilities. We don't know enough about newcomer women with disabilities. And I could go on and on. So we also need to look at mentorship.
Right.
And we need to look at communications. We need to be looking at promoting the women with disabilities who are entrepreneurs and, what they're doing. So, a lot of work done.
Yeah, but there's a lot to be done. Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of those things. I mean, with backers, not really getting into it, but we've noticed, and this is obviously talk about disaggregated statistics. You could put, women with disabilities into sort of another pot, but the one stat that I saw that was interesting that we see up until 2019, less than 1% of venture capital or VC funding went to Black entrepreneurs, right? Or people of color, right? You could probably then lump even less of that into women with disabilities. So it's very underserved in a lot of areas. You mentioned certain aspects, right? So it's sort of, they're falling through the cracks and no one's really figuring out where they even are or what those cracks are. So it's really identifying who's falling through the cracks maybe, right? And then figuring out what the cracks are and then figuring out. So it's like multi-layered, right? Who they are, what the cracks are, and then how to start to maybe fill those gaps, right? And start to really identify areas that you could support them in all the facets, as you said, right? It's very interesting for definitely for entrepreneurs. So are there any programs right now that are sort of implemented that if somebody, a woman such as yourself, with on that spectrum or with just general disability in general, I just said general twice there, but you know what I mean? Are there places maybe where they can go? You mentioned a couple of places, obviously the Diversity Institute, I was not familiar with, but are there certain places or programs where they can maybe go get help as an entrepreneur? Maybe they're watching this. They're like, you know what? Like Wanda, that describes me and my family. Maybe I should, whatever, what are some of the, not so much in identifying them as autistic, but maybe programs that they could support them. Is there anything out there that sort of comes top of mind right now, or are we starting from scratch?
No, there's some things. I mean, I'm a graduate.
Well, yes.
I'm an alum. I'm a proud alum of
Right.
RISE. So RISE is the only program for entrepreneurs that's focused on those with mental health challenges and addictions. Okay. So I completed that in November. And actually, I posted the photo. You're probably not surprised. That night, I had my oldest son take a picture of me. I was so happy. Okay. So I went through that program. And as a woman with autism and someone who's also been diagnosed with anxiety and trauma, I was able to enroll in RISE. So
is it RISE?
RISE. So if you have a mental health challenge and or an addiction, you're in Canada and you're thinking about becoming an entrepreneur, go to RISE and get more information. They're great. I've also been certified as a diverse supplier. So through the Inclusive Workplace Supply Council of Canada, if you have a disability or if you're a veteran or both, get certified as a diverse supplier. That will open doors for you.
Interesting.
There's several others. Actually, Justin, I just gave the keynote. I had a really, really wonderful time. I was so fortunate to give the keynote on Saturday as part of the Horizon 21 virtual 2-day event organized by Giant Steps out of Montreal. And it was about entrepreneurship as a viable pathway for autistics. And so I highlighted RISE, I highlighted IWSCC, I mentioned the WEC and my research and our research, right. And I talked about other programs and supports. There are programs and supports out there. It's a growing area.
Right.
Yeah. Do we need more? Yes. Do we need to
course.
augment ones we have? Yes. Do we need to communicate better the ones we have, more accessible? Yes. 20% of people in Canada, with disabilities do not have access to the internet.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a huge barrier right there. So, I mean, so much work to do. And my conclusion, I said in summation, more work is needed.
Right.
It is a growing area. It's receiving more attention, and it's receiving more attention from leaders.
Okay.
And those are really the folks who are responsible for driving change.
It's kind of, I mean, obviously myself, it's kind of, I don't know, selfish of me. Obviously the entrepreneurial side for me is I lived my whole life and I should have just been an entrepreneur the entire time. But, right, it's almost like, and I think it's very interesting that, a lot of focus is obviously in employment, right? So working in working environments, I think it's really cool that there's a focus also on the entrepreneurial side to help, to guide or support those that want to create and build businesses. Because I think maybe those that are watching and I think people look at disabilities as just that, like the lower ability. And so maybe the inability to go create and do things, where I think you're an example of it, and many others that maybe more ability, right? You have better ability potentially in certain facets to be able to do different things, think a little differently, see things in a different way, different manner that definitely will be advantageous in the entrepreneurial space, right? I think especially, you talk about various, you said not disabilities, not conditions. You said, what was the term you wanted to use instead of
disorder?
Disorder, not disorder, but a condition.
Disorder,
exactly, right? Into a condition, right? So it can be seen as a good condition or positive condition that can generate positive outcomes, right? That a lot of people, and again, you're using terms that I'm not overly familiar with, but what was I? I was a neurotypical. There we go. Neurotypical. Someone that's neurotypical may not understand, but I don't need to understand, but they're going to produce something that's significantly different, better, whatever, than I would even have imagined potentially, or anyone else that's neurotypical, right? So I think that's interesting that, being able to shed a light on all kind of the diversity, right, is especially in the entrepreneurial space, is really, really interesting, really cool. So I guess, I really appreciate you joining me here on this, Wanda. Where can people find you? I guess is obviously Liberty Co. Is it libertyco.com? I think it was.
.ca.
.ca.
So you can find me through my website. There is a contact form there.
Right.
I have a reputation of being on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Today.
Yes. Yeah. We've connected. Actually, I wore my orange because we were talking a little bit about that as well, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Obviously Indigenous justice, right? Fighting
Indigenous self-determination is something that I really support. I need to know so much more about it. Obviously, it's something that
we talked about.
I support all facets of diversity in our country and in our world. It's never a matter of saying one's more important than the other. There's room for all facets of diversity. And frankly, they should be celebrated. So you can see a lot of this on my LinkedIn.
Right.
Please connect with me if you wish to. My email is on my LinkedIn profile as well. My email is on my website. There's a contact form on the website. I just said that. And you can often see me writing under the banner of the Inclusion Revolution and posting under the Inclusion Revolution. This is the disability movement. I did not find it. I belong to it, but it was founded by Caroline Casey and Paul Pullman. It's about changing the way we think about disability, especially disability employment. So hashtag Inclusion Revolution. And if we're winding up, the way I like to close.
Well, I was going to talk about Liberty Co.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, asking everyone to join me on the Inclusion Revolution.
Okay, for sure,
because Liberty Co is about the
Right.
inclusion revolution. It's about disability employment and specifically neurodiversity, and then within that autism, but really in the broadest way, it's about disability employment. And that's why I really rally behind the inclusion revolution.
Inclusion revolution. I like it. So, I mean, I was going to ask you, my next question was a little bit about, tell us about a little bit about what Liberty Co. is or does. Obviously you wrote, you wrote the report. What is it that Liberty Co., like, what is your mission, your vision, values? I don't want to get your business report, but or your business plan, but what is Liberty Co.? Tell us sort of.
Liberty Co. is about helping organizations recruit and retain neurodiverse individuals.
Okay.
Or neurodivergent. If we're saying individuals, neurodiverse, we're talking about the employment, but that's what Liberty Co. is about. It's really that, and that takes on, a number of forms. I do speak. I enjoy speaking. I enjoy collaborating, love collaborating, in fact, writing, all about how we can increase the participation level of the neurodiverse population in the workforce around employment. And yeah, that's what Liberty Co. is all about. And,
cool.
I think it's not a matter of really separating anything. I think all the things we've talked about, and thank you for all your great questions, all the things that we've touched on really point towards why I started Liberty Co.
Right.
What it's about, areas that I'm working in. And I hope it hits a spark with some of our listeners. And people
we should definitely collaborate too. I mean, I think it'd be cool talking about the entrepreneurial side and neurodiverse and diversity in general, sort of with backers and, the ability from a funding perspective, we should definitely look to some sort of collaboration there. I'd love to explore that further off air.
Welcome that.
Yeah.
I'd welcome that, Justin.
Yeah,
sure.
Sort of discuss some stuff about that.
Definitely.
So I really appreciate it. Don't want to take all your time for the day here. Typically end it with one last question. And not to throw you on the spot, but if there was one word, or I guess, I'll sit with one word that if you could go back in time and say to a younger you or to another person coming up. So it might be two different words, but somebody coming up or a younger you, what would that one word of advice kind of be?
Believe.
Believe? Okay.
Believe in yourself.
Yeah, definitely.
And I wish I had believed in myself.
Right.
But it's not too late. It's never too late.
Right.
So to those who are coming up, believe in yourself. Find one other person who believes in you. It's great to have more.
Right.
Focus on one.
At least get one to begin with, right? Kind of, yeah. It starts baby steps kind of thing. Do you not to kind of go? I'm like you. Probably I could go on asking questions that I think some of it's always interesting to hear people's stories. But do you think that you didn't believe, and what made you not believe? Okay, right.
Yeah, I didn't believe in myself, and
what would be different if you how would that? I agree 100% believe in yourself, but where because some people are out there and it's very difficult when you haven't been through life experiences, you haven't been up and down and back up and back down, right? So it's tough to really see that, life often is ups and downs. Where I'm just asking more about your advice. How can somebody believe? Realize it's get somebody to believe in yourself, but where can they really find that belief? We'll end off from that. I realize you have to go. Just within? Yeah.
Within, I could say so much more.
Yeah.
And there is a lot more to be said. And, Justin, I'm not a therapist and I'm not a researcher.
So it's tough.
However, it is a lot of times that simple. Believing yourself. And actually, I don't know if I can do it, but at the very top there is
does it say believe? Yeah, the blue circle.
Believe.
Yeah. Believe. There you go. Awesome.
And I didn't know myself.
Right.
And I encourage folks, and I'm not getting a commission on this. So if you want to read my Broadview article, you want to read my Reader's Digest article, I'm not getting commissions. I didn't know myself and I wasn't self-aware. And when you're not self-aware and you don't know yourself, you can't believe in yourself. Believe in yourself.
Yeah.
Focus on your strengths, find one other person and go from there. And I was just asked this question earlier today at a talk I gave.
There you go. So it's not out of the blue then. There you go. Yeah.
No, and that circle in my office is there for a reason. I walked into a store, I saw it, it said believe. And I said, Wanda, you need to have that. And I bought it right away. It's been there ever since.
Perfect. Cool. Well, Wanda, I really appreciate you joining me today. Thank you. Thank you very much. Like I said, we should connect off air. So thank you. Everyone else, this is One Take, powered by backers, Justin Fox, Wanda Deschamps, and we will see you again very soon. Hey there. Welcome to One Take, powered by backers.
Right? No judging.
Yeah.
No judging.
The millennials are really changing that.
Is charm. No.
All success begins with desire.
I feel like I'm on fire right now.
OMG, baby.